Hello and welcome to Grumpy Old Crone with me, Annie, where I'm going to be whinging for about 30 minutes, give or take, about things that don't matter very much in the pagan and witchcraft communities. Now, as always, I'm going to go on to, first up, existing whilst witchy. Now, I've got a weird sort of witchy aesthetic whinge today, and I suspect that this might be something that really only annoys me. So do feel free to shout at me in comments if you need to. I honestly don't mind. I honestly don't mind people shouting at me in comments. Someone in comments on the last video seemed to be under the impression that that I make my secret Patreon videos about people that annoy me on the main channel. I suspect that they thought that they were potentially the subject of one of these videos, but I'm happy to confirm that no, I never make videos about people that just like a bit of an argument on the main channel. I'm absolutely fine about people disagreeing with me. I mean, I've got a talking head channel about my opinions. I'm very aware of the fact that people are going to disagree with me, and you know what? I think that's absolutely just fine. I mean, to make it very, very clear, the people that I choose to single out in videos over on Patreon, and I really need to get another one of those made soon, are those who are racist, sexist, fascist bigots who try to insult, demean and upset others. They often land in the default YouTube hate filter, which needs cleaning out like a bath plug full of soap scum hair every now and then. But sometimes, just for shits and giggles, I will let them out into the comments section so that other people can see that they do actually exist. Now, if you just fundamentally disagree with me, that's fine. That's kind of the point of YouTube. Disagree away. If you haven't noticed, I absolutely love a good argument. And if you put your point across really well, I may even change my viewpoint. I accept also that sometimes, you know, I'm just wrong. Anyway, enough of that. On with my issue today, and it is, as I said, weirdly specific. It is, and please excuse my pronunciation here, okay, because my pronunciation is shocking, but it is the Hexenbrut Wolfshagen dance to Schutteldein Speck. Okay, there's going to be a whole lot of people out there going, right now, so I'll put in a little clip so you kind of know what I'm talking about. Just imagine an insanely catchy German rapper bagpipe thing going on behind here. Go look it up. It's a good tune. Now, before I get into this, I would like to make it super clear that I love a bit of a dance. And I also think that dance is a really great way to raise power for spell workings. And I really, really like the tune of Schutteldein Speck, which means shake your bacon or shake your big bum, as I understand it. Please bear in mind that my German is rudimentary at most and generally restricted to ordering food, beer, locating toilets, telling people they're beautiful and that I love their singing, and that I'm really tired now and I'm going to go to bed. And from this, you will correctly ascertain that most of my German friends are those that I meet at music events, and happily for me, they mostly all speak excellent English and almost certainly cringe horrifically at my attempts to mangle their beautiful language. Now, I will say that if you Google the words to this song, and I'll put a link to it, it is a tad problematic, to put it mildly. Let's just say that it isn't really an ode to female empowerment, shall we? I'll put the words here, feel free to pause it so that you can read them. However, it has that amazing kind of bagpipe-esque riff which gets into your brain and you find yourself humming it for days afterwards. So, you know, there's that, isn't there? I seem to remember first seeing the YouTube video with it in good few years back when it first went viral, and I loved it. I loved the music, I loved the empowerment of the dance. It was fun and it was catchy and it was funny, and it felt like the very definition of a video that kind of deserved to go viral. And as all viral videos do, it just kind of like passed out of the public eye, except that even when the video passed out of the public eye, the dance didn't. It was a number of just simple moves accessorized by a broom and some silly costumes. It was easily copyable, and that's exactly what's happened. Groups all over the world took it to their hearts, dressed up in green face and pointy hats and bought cheap brooms and taught themselves the dance. It started appearing at events everywhere. Halloween dance? There's a local witchy dance group that can do something for you. Moot event? There's a local witchy dance group that can do something for you. Village fete, school fundraiser. Guess what? There's this group that can do something for you. They dress up as witches. Isn't it fun? And yes, it is kind of fun, or at least it was, but now it's just got really, really ubiquitous. People with comedy pointy hats and stick-on noses turn up dancing to this hugely misogynistic song everywhere. And after quite a lot of research, I'm fairly confident in saying that the group who originated this are not even witches. I think, once again, with my somewhat basic knowledge of German and a bit of help from Google Translate, I think it's just a dance troupe with an interest in local history preservation, as far as I can tell. So it feels to me, a witch, a lot like a load of atheists dressing up as comedy Jesus, complete with, holy wounds and a glow-in-the-dark Sacred Heart, and then dancing around crucifixes to Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines. It just makes me feel a bit yucky. There's no depth to it, there's no emotion to it. And whilst I absolutely accept that not everything has to be deep and sacred, I kind of feel that when something of this size rolls out into the world, portraying us in the same tired tropes of evil green-skinned women with big noses and pointy hats, it doesn't really do us any favours at all. It either persuades people that witchcraft is comedic, note, it isn't, that sexism is acceptable, note, it isn't, or that this is what witches really do. Note, it really, really isn't. It buys into that same old early modern trope of witches meeting in the woods to meet with the devil and dance, and both legitimises and ridicules it at the same time, which, it takes some doing really. But I've tried to figure out why this brings out such strong emotions in me when it is essentially just some people doing a silly, fun little dance. Why the hell should I care who is doing a daft dance? And I've come to the conclusion that it's not actually anything to do with the original dance at all. I'm not at all upset by a German dance group putting on a fun costume dance for Walpurgisnacht. The thing that makes me really uncomfortable is the way that so many people who have no link to the craft are fine with putting this damaging trope out into the world. It trivialises something that is incredibly important to so many of us. I asked the question last week about why viewers chose to come to Witchcraft, and there were so many amazing personal stories. The thing that linked the huge majority of those stories together was the sense of reclaiming personal power and inner strength. How witchcraft gave people the ability to transcend awful personal circumstances and reclaim control in situations that threatened their physical and their well-being in very fundamental ways. This isn't just a silly dress-up sort of a situation. This is something that means a lot to very, very many people, myself included. Now, we live in a world where ridiculing groups for physical, mental or spiritual traits is quite rightly looked on poorly. Now, we're not going to mention the giant orange toddler in America and his viewpoint, okay, just nod. I'm talking about people who are in their right minds. So why is it not only okay, but actually funny to ridicule witches? Now, I know this is a rhetorical question, by the way, so you don't need to answer it, but if it makes you feel better, then, feel free, comments are right there. I think what upsets me is the way that people have taken a catchy song, but seriously, peeps, look at the lyrics, look at the lyrics, and they've turned it into the way that so many people now view witches, or at the very best consolidated how they already viewed witches. Now, interestingly, having watched a lot of people dancing these moves to this song on YouTube whilst I was researching this video, I noted that my visceral feeling didn't come into play when it was obviously a group of witches dancing. There were a few videos of people at moots or witch-centric celebrations, which looked great. Generally, they don't play into the ugly witch stereotype nearly so heavily, and the dance had a feeling of reclamation and joy, and I'm actually fine with that. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this. I'm almost certainly overthinking this. Actually, I'm definitely overthinking this, but I can't help thinking that it would be great if a less misogynistic song was used, it was danced by actual witches. Nobody did fancy dress, ugly or evil witch costuming. And if everyone actually had a sense of rhythm, that would be good. Yeah. Right. Well, anyway, I'm going to shut up about that now, because I think I've probably lost the plot a bit, haven't I? Okay, right. Yeah, okay, I've lost the plot, definitely. So it means we should probably hurriedly move on to meat and to potatoes. So as we enter into autumn and the dark half of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere, I think it's a great time to look at our practice, no matter how old or new that practice might be, and just to analyse it a little bit. There's a rising and popular fashion to look at shadow working at this time of the year. Now, I'm talking about the modern 20th century practice made popular by Carl Jung, which basically involves confronting the less savoury parts of your personality and analysing and then incorporating them into your whole. Now, don't for one hot second believe that this is an ancient witchcraft practice. I can promise you that Goody Smith did not sit outside her hovel in the 16th century wondering about her inner psychological landscape. The luxury of having the time and mental space to examine ourselves in this way is very much a modern thing. Now, that being said, being modern doesn't make it worthless at all. Taking an analytical look at ourselves at this time of the year with the aid of a third-party tool such as tarot or pendulums can be an excellent thing to do. When the nights are dark, why not work through some of the dark parts of your own soul? I've not really done it as a separate practice much before. I always have an element of that for when I read for myself, but devoting a whole lump of my practice to it, that's kind of new to me. So personally speaking, I printed off a shadow working workbook from Benabel Wen's website. I'm slowly working through it with the aid of my Spirit Keeper's tarot. It's an interesting practice. Now, I'm not sure how much I'm gaining from this at the moment, but I'll tell you when I've finished. For my more old school witches, or those who learned in lines dating from before the 20th century, shadow working can mean something very specific and very, very different. Let's just say that it's entirely possible to work with your own shadow as a fetch or a familiar type spirit. You can charge it to do various things such as guarding, patrolling, watching, etc. Obviously, it works better in the dark because, shadow. But, if you find older witches who get a bit snippy about the term shadow working, that's why. To some of us, it means something completely different, or you're certainly used to. Now, before I go on, I will say that kind of shadow working has never played a part in my own practice. The idea of separating my own shadow from myself feels a bit weird. It's not for me. If you're interested, then I'd recommend looking up some pre-20th century sources, because that's when Jungian practice took over and kind of changed the term. But anyway, that was a huge digression right at the start, wasn't it? Do I get the digression medal? Should we start we should start a digression counter. Okay, so that was digression 1. Anyway, back to where I intended to start this little section. So looking critically at our practice is a great thing to do, and doing it at this time of the year feels kind of perfect. I've always loved the concept of Samhain being the fresh start. It feels fresh to me. I'm also aware that that's a 1970s idea, not a historic one. The idea of what day New Year is located on has changed over the centuries along with the calendar. Another one of those things that the bloody church is responsible for, and different cultures. Sorry, digression number 2. But for me, well, I like the feeling of closing off the year with my beloved dead and then moving into something fresh and new as the world sleeps a little. It's like that dream-filled mini sleep you have after you've snoozed the alarm clock at the weekend, It's a time for dreaming and planning and looking inward, and is, in my admittedly very flawed opinion, perfect for looking at your practice and what serves you or what has ceased to serve you over the past and previous year. Now, I find that throughout the year, I try different things in my practice. One year, I was all about creating and collecting moon water for every single full moon and using that charged water in spells according to the energy of the full moon under which I collected it. I still maintain it was a great idea, but it did lead to me having 12 glass bottles of water in my study, which I habitually tripped over every time I tried to get my sewing machine out or needed to tidy the room. 2 years later, I still had most of them because I don't use a lot of moon water. I do use it for, like permeable circle water, enchanting, blessing and cleansing. But honestly, a couple of bottles is just fine for that. You don't need 15 pints of the stuff, all very slightly different. I've always envied those people who do, like the witchy room tours on YouTube. You have a whole room for this, with beautifully set up roomy desks and permanent filming setups for tarot readings. I bet you could fit at least 12 bottles of moon water under a desk like that. I once I once got accused in comments of having a toilet seat in my office. It's a ring light for it's a ring light for my tarot setup. You can probably see it there. I did think that anybody who thought I kept a toilet seat in my study was probably thinking that I was pushing multitasking a bit far, maybe. There are limits, people, and I have standards. And bathrooms, very nice, very clean bathrooms. I know there are some people in other parts of the world who don't believe that the UK has discovered the internet or electricity yet, but I can, hand on heart, promise you that we don't tend to shit in our studies. Sorry, digressed on the digression. How many stars do I get for that? I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, anyway, yes. Moving on. Our personal living circumstances tend to govern how we all practice. Not all of us have huge amounts of space to devote to this stuff. If you do have a room in your house that is completely 100% devoted to your pagan and or witchcraft practice, I would like you to know that I am very glad for you. Glad and also wildly jealous. My space, this space, is a study for my day job. I'm currently constantly surrounded by like bits of sheet music everywhere. It's a library, it's instrument storage, sewing and embroidery room, craft storage and filming space. And I'm incredibly lucky to have this. I credit my very, very happy marriage to the fact that Mr. Grumpy Old Crone and I both have our own studies. His is just next door. And his study is packed to the brim with swords, leather armour, leather working tools, machines, computers, DVDs, half-finished projects and more. There's dye splashed on the walls, at least 2 lost and incredibly expensive contact lenses, leftover packaging materials and more. If we had to share a space, I would have exploded at him and he would have exploded at me and we'd have had an argument about it. But this way, the 2-room way, is great. Occasionally I go into his office and tut at the dye stains, and occasionally he comes into mine and tuts at the amount of unread books I own. We've been together for 8 years and we've never actually had a real argument, although we did come close that time he ordered Kentucky Fried Chicken without telling me or asking if I wanted to add anything to the order. I'm still salty about that. Bollocks! Digression, sorry. Right, anyway, sorry. Back to my original point before I went skipping off into the woods of completely unrelated anecdotes. I didn't need 12 bottles of moon water. I didn't use 12 bottles of moon water. 12 bottles of moon water were absolutely in my way. When I looked at my study space that October, I realised it was not a practice that was serving me and was actively getting in my way, so I stopped. I still have some of it left over, but it's easy enough to make again, and if I'm honest, I tend to use more spring water from Glastonbury actually. I always have a bottle of red and white spring water, and when I run low, it is the perfect excuse to go back and refill my bottles. The same concept of looking at your whole practice is a really good way to spend the weeks and days before Samhain, I find. The joy of paganism and witchcraft is that no matter what you think I am saying, there is no one way to do it, and there is no stigma attached to changing what you do. In the Christian church, people follow the same litanies, creeds and prayers that have been used for hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 years. Changing things inevitably leads to schisms within the church, as some people fight to change and others fight to keep it the same. Now, whilst there will always be some people resistant to change, and gods alone know, I am Mrs. Change-averse myself, although I am working on that, I tend to think that paganism and witchcraft are much more open to people looking at things and saying, nope, that no longer serves me. It's also very easy to say, you know what, I think I need a new deity in my life. This is something that I've been looking at as well. I am, as I've often said, a Gaian. I believe in the supremacy and self-regulation of the earth as our mother goddess. But I also believe that she doesn't really care or notice much about us. She isn't a deity that I feel I can petition. And I've been thinking about that a bit recently too. I've been doing some inner working on where my thoughts and beliefs are aligning these days and how I can potentially expand that, particularly in regards to my witchcraft practice rather than solely as my pagan worship. So, in order to expand my practice in one direction, it seems possible that I will need to shrink it in another, or else I'm simply going to run out of time and space on my altar. It's time to look at what serves me. I would suggest that if you're at all concerned or curious about whether your path and practice fits as well now as it did last year or the year before that, then this is the perfect time to look at it. Here are some things to ask yourself. What do I believe? Now, this is a tricky question, trickier than people in mainstream religions might imagine. We are not, well, at least we should not be, told what to believe by other people. Do you feel that any deities or spirits you work with are pulling their weight in this relationship? If not, why not? Are they feeling neglected? Do they sense that you are not really a great cheerleader for them these days? If you still connect to them, could you undertake a dedication promise for them? Offer a candle lighting for a set number of days, for example, or find them a particular statue or a spirit house? Or is there another deity or spirit calling to you? Do you need to close down one relationship before opening another? Or is there room in your heart and in your practice for more than one? Look at your altar or your ritual storage space. Is it cluttered? Is it dirty? Clean it. Rededicate it with flowers or offerings. And as you put things back onto it, ask yourself when the last time you touched, intentionally looked at or used the things that you're putting back. Do they still have a part to play on that altar? Or are they simply there because that's where they live? Remember that your altar is a working space as much as a worship space, and you need practical tools for that working. Maybe there's nothing wrong in rehoming things that don't work for you anymore and consecrating new tools. I have an athame that's super sharp because I need a super sharp tool on my altar for cutting things. Why in the name of little green apples would I need a pair of scissors and an athame? So I just have a very sharp athame, and that does everything I need it to and reduces the amount of stuff in my space. I also have a little ritually fired bowl that I made at a camp which holds a lot of the tiny goddess statues that I occasionally like to make. Do I need it on my altar? Yeah, actually I probably don't. Which incense burner do I always use? I prefer the look of the one I bought from Star Child. It is glazed gold inside. So pretty. But maybe the one I made with intent is more useful? I don't know, I'm genuinely stuck on this. I was stuck last year as well, which is why both are still there. But maybe this year I need to finally make that decision. I don't have to get rid of the one I don't use. I can just store it away in case I change my mind next year too. Do I have books that I don't use? This is a big one for me, because if I finish a book that I don't like, then I try to give it away immediately. The things that stay on my little bookshelf are the ones that I return to time and time again. They aren't always the things that you might expect, and certain authors crop up time and time again. Miller, Pearson, Pennick. But a lot of us hold on to books even if they don't resonate with us. Having lived for a couple of decades in a kind of book hoarding situation and felt the relief when I finally left that environment, I do actually find it quite easy to release things in that way. I do in fact have a book release pile. If something doesn't reverberate with me when I finish it, I bung it on the pile by the living room door. If somebody visits my home and sees something they like on that pile, then they're free to take it. You know, some people make out like bandits, and it makes my little heart really glad. I do recognise that this is hard for a lot of people though. But ask yourself, will I want to reread this in a couple of years' time? And if the answer is no, then release it. Finally, the big one, look at your time. Look at how you spend that time and how you feel about it in regards to your practice. It's super important to understand that you don't need to be spending every free moment ensorceling coffee mugs or whatever. Everyone has a life and a limited amount of time in that life. I absolutely don't believe that horrendous quote of everyone has the same 24 hours, choose how you use it wisely. It's complete bollocks. There is no way in hell I could have run this channel 15 years ago. I was deep in the trenches of active daily mothering, school runs, cooking family meals, emotional labour, mental labour in a poor marriage, working an office job, looking after animals, actively gigging and more. It was too much. I felt run off my feet. Did I feel that I had a whole evening every month on the full moon to spend worshipping? I'm skipping over the bit where I was actually the world's worst Christian at that moment, but you hopefully understand what I'm getting at here. But now, as a self-employed crone, I have the privilege of time that many people do not have. I always try to recognise my own privileges, and this is definitely one of them. So I am absolutely not saying that you should give up the PTA so that you can practice more regularly, unless, of course, you bloody hate the PTA, in which case, give that shit up. Life is short, don't waste it on things that you hate. But sometimes you don't need to carve out whole evenings or whole nights to do things. 5 minutes with a morning coffee or a morning tea can be a very meditative moment. You can ground and centre in the time it takes the drink to cool down enough to sip it. Breathe a prayer in the shower. I do this all the time. It doesn't need to be poetic and beautiful. Lady, I love you is a complete prayer right there. And if I'm honest with you, it's the one that I say the most often. I will always say it when I see a part of nature that moves me, when I realise how blessed I am, when I'm stressed. Lady, I love you. Honestly, it makes a difference. It is really important to understand that you are not somehow failing as a pagan or a witch if you don't have the time to practice regularly. People's lives have seasons in exactly the same way as the world around us. When we're young and spring-like, we have boundless energy to grow our lives and our interests. We don't need as much sleep and we don't tire as easily. In the summer of our lives, our days are long, but we're filled with things to do in them. We're building careers, we're running homes, we're parenting. The list is endless. And we run ourselves ragged trying to be all things to all people. Autumn, things slow down. We have more time, but energy runs lower too as our cycle starts to close. And winter, let's just sleep, eh? Many of the mad commitments of earlier seasons have dropped away, and this is a great time for study and practice as our hair turns snowy and our gaze turns inwards. But we can't do everything all the time. Please recognise that. If your dance cart is full, do little things. Breathe a prayer. Stir your drink with intention. Draw a sigil on the shower door in condensation. I will say from bitter experience that if you can't sleep, middle-aged insomnia is a thing, getting up and spending time in devotion at an altar can help hugely, because then you've done a lovely pagan thing and you're probably more relaxed and ready to sleep when you try again. Or not. Insomnia is a bastard. But maybe just look at stripping back and rebuilding your practice this October. It's a really valuable experience, and it can help to make you feel less guilty about what you're not doing and to gain more value from the things that you do decide to keep. Right, now we are going to move on to the positive bit. Here comes the positive bit. On we go, enough of me whinging. So I do have to say, trigger warning, I'm going to be mentioning animal remains. Okay, so a dear friend of mine has been sorting out his family home, readying it for sale after the passing of his parents a while back, and he has come across a whole load of treasures whilst doing so. I've done the same task myself many years back, and it's not an easy one, so I really appreciate that he found some treasures and he thought of me. Now, whilst I am usually not the first person to advocate filling your house with stuff, these are two particularly beautiful items. My friend knows that I am a huge fan of Baba Yaga, and so when he found this incredibly beautiful brass mortar and pestle, he immediately thought of me. It's a design unlike any I've seen before, but it is wonderful. The mortar itself is really heavy and it rings like a bell when it's struck, which is super useful for someone like myself who uses sound in witchcraft. And it sits beautifully on a table for use. The pestle is actually double-ended, which is really practical. I have no idea why it's not the standard design. So if you've got something sticky or problematic to grind, then you can just turn it upside down and use a different ingredient without having to stop and wash it. It also sits really beautifully in the palm of the hand while you're pushing down to grind things. So now I do have many mortar and pestles in my life at this point, so I'm going to need to rehome at least one of them. So it's time to walk the walk that I mentioned earlier in the video, I guess. Oh well. Anyway, the second thing that my friend found was a bit odder. The garden of the house was really wild and overgrown, and he found an abandoned greenhouse with a missing door. And when he chopped down the ivy that had covered it from view, he realised that urban foxes had found it and used it as a home and a shelter probably for very many years. And over the course of generations and generations of foxes using it to shelter, live and love and raise families, it had become a resting place for one large dog fox. He'd gone to the greenhouse, found a soft place to lie down in the foliage, and he'd breathed his last in shelter and in comfort. My friend found his skeleton curled up safely with no sign of injury or violence, and he thought of me. So he carefully packaged up this old patriarch's skull and he sent it to me. Now I've cleaned it, and I need to make some gentle repairs to the jaws and teeth from where they shook loose in the posting process, but I will be sanding it, blessing it, engraving it, and using it as a spirit house for familiar work with respect and love for the original animal. Now, I would never buy bones normally because I'm always concerned about the fate of an animal. I don't want to use something where cruelty and violence has been part of a life. That's bad spirit energy right there. But a veteran old fox who's just curled up and slept his way into the next life, yeah, that kind of works for me. And amusingly, this is the first of two foxes that has come into me. My best friend Lisa discovered a fox in her garden too. He too had slept his way naturally into the next life. However, he was not a skeleton. So he has been resting underground prior to me going over to hers and digging up the bones for use later. Now, I've never cleaned a whole skeleton before, so this could be either terrifying or exciting or potentially revolting. I'll let you know. Now, bones and physical relics don't play a part in everyone's practice, and I realise that. They do, however, play a part in mine. Now, I don't use anything that has pain or unnatural death attached to it, but I believe in honouring the animal that has passed on. I also think that a real skull is a much better spirit house than something built by a human hand. And you know, these seem perfect. The fact that both animals had passed naturally and peacefully in a place that they felt safe makes me feel like I can work ethically with these remains. So I've tried my best to glue it together to act as a spirit house, but it's a bit wonky, owing to my complete lack of knowledge as regards fox jaw anatomy. But I think it's not too bad, and I'm quite pleased to have got something sorted out with it. So I reattached the jaw, I amended the broken eye orbit, and I replaced the teeth. So next up is some kind of appropriate ornamentation. I haven't quite made up my mind on this, but you know, I'll give it a bit of thought. Anyway, I think that's probably our time for this week up. So I'm going to offer you this week's blessing as we close up for today. May the peace and love of the divine fill your life and heart all this week. And as that peace and love comes to you, may you feel the strength to pass it forward into the world and spread that love and light further and further out into the world. Blessed be, my friends. Bye.